Be my hope, be my song, Jesus. Be the fire in my heart, be the wind in these sails, be the reason that I live, Jesus, be the center, be my source, be my life, Jesus,
All right, we'll just read the verse, we'll do an overview, and then we'll get down into it. Romans 12, beginning of verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual act of worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Okay, so remember when you see therefore, that's Paul is summarizing something. He's saying, okay, in light of everything that we just talked about, and in this case it would be chapters 1 through 11 of how that we are hopelessly lost as sinners, whether we're Gentiles or Jews, and that justification through faith is the only means we have for reconciliation with God. Okay, so Paul is summing that up. He's saying, in light of everything that God has done, in light of all of his mercies towards us found in Jesus Christ, this then is what we should do. But there's a disconnect there, isn't there? Because we talked about how some of us have been Christians for a long time and some of us haven't been Christians that long, but we don't really feel like transformation has taken place. Why is that? Well, there's many reasons for that. And we're going to talk, and we're going to start today by looking at the world, but one of the biggest reasons is because of how we think. Of what we think about. You know, you've heard it said that as a man thinks, so he is. That what we think influences how we act. And so what we think of Jesus is probably the most important thing we think of when we think of it. So how we think of Jesus and what we think of Jesus affects how we treat each other. It affects decisions that we make in business, in school, in life in general. So let me ask you this, and this is just rhetorical. When you think of Jesus, what do you think of? Because a lot of us think as Jesus, you know, we've kind of dumbed him down a lot and just made him like this really just sweet, nice guy who forgives you for whatever you do, and he's not about punishing and all this other stuff. You're cool with Jesus, right? But that's not. Jesus was God, okay? And there's an aspect of God where our sinfulness, our rebellion, draws his wrath, and justly so. And Jesus said just as much about that, maybe not, the whole Old Testament. That's what people point to. Well, the Old Testament, God, he was angry. Now, God was very loving and very gracious in the Old Testament. And Jesus is very loving and very gracious. But Jesus had an awful lot to say about hell, too. And how our conduct and our relationship and our attitudes towards God affect our ultimate destination. So, we're going to start just breaking this down. We talked about transformation. That's where we get our word metamorphosis. That's where the bug, what is it called? I can't even think of it now. Yeah, a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, okay? It's the same thing. That's where we get that word from. And Paul talks about us actually transforming, but in order to transform, we cannot conform. Now, that's a whole different process, okay? Conforming means essentially that we're being pressed into a mold. That the world or whatever it is, whatever it is for you, if it's your friends or if it's your job or whatever, is conforming you instead of you being transformed, you're now being conformed by this outside pressure. Okay, and that pressure is turning you into what it wants to be in. And listen, we live in a crazy, crazy world, okay? And it's growing increasingly dark and evil. But it's been that way throughout time, guys. Okay, just because it's happening in America now doesn't mean like this crazy thing is just happening. No, I've encouraged you before. Go back and read the history books. Okay, all major societies have turned this way before their demise. Okay, and so we live in a world where morality is increasingly relativistic, just like truth is. Okay, there is no objective morals, and if you wonder why people are so hostile towards Christianity, it's because Christians say yes, there is indeed an objective moral truth. Truth is God's truth. All truth is God's truth, no matter who says it. And when you have that, here's the problem. Okay, here's why the world hates us so much. Is if you have that, then there's conviction. I was reading the other day, and we were talking about great teachers, and I was studying. And this guy said, here's the thing about Jesus. It was an atheist that had converted. And he said, here's the thing about Jesus. You can read Confucius. You can read all these old prophets and seers and, wise guys. But when you read Jesus, there is a moral just fight that takes over you. You either have to do something with him or totally reject him. You cannot leave just saying, well, that's some good thought. Because to read Jesus, to know Jesus, to hear about Jesus, is he's more than just a good teacher. That he is God incarnate. So let's read about that. Let's go back, because here's the pattern that Paul is talking about in Romans 1. Okay, beginning in verse 18, you can turn there. I'm about to read this whole thing, okay? For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them. Okay, so here's the first thing. The first pattern is that we, as humans, when we reject God, we begin to suppress the truth. Okay? That means that common sense goes out the door. That means that the relative thought that we talk about in our society and that we're subjected to is that is now common sense. But it doesn't make any sense. Because we've talked about it before. If you say there is no absolute truth, you've just made an absolute statement. Okay? So you're saying that is truth. You say, well, it's true for me and not true for you. Here's the deal. Cancer is bad, whoever gets it. Okay? That's true for absolutely everybody. Red lights mean stop. That's true for absolutely everybody. $5 pizzas at Little Caesars are regretful. That is true for everybody, okay? Absolutely everybody. And so we can't live in this world, but why do we want to do that? Because if my truth is my truth, that means I can do whatever pleases me with no moral boundaries, okay? So that means that, well, let's talk about one of the issues that has come to the forefront as of late. You know, the transgender bathroom deal. That doesn't make sense, does it, guys? No, it doesn't make sense. I mean, this may be crude, but whatever. But your plumbing determines your sex, not your head. Okay, not what you have in your head. So common sense would tell you that we do live in a world where pedophiles and rapists and all these. But here's the crazy thing: is that if you're a naturalist, you cannot call their behavior bad because you have no grounds with which to do that. But common sense tells us God, the moral code that he wrote on everyone's heart says, no, that is not right. And so, you know, while there may be those that say, you know what, I don't want my daughter going to the bathroom where some guy, just because he says he identifies. And look, high schools, they're letting in schools now. Look, you know how high school boys are, right? Yeah, they'll be transgender for a second, right? To go into the, and I mean, it's serious. I mean, we're not even laughing. That's really what this leads to. But that seems like common sense, doesn't it? But not in this culture, okay? Because why? Because men have rejected God's truth. We are now saying that we are God's, okay? And we determine morals, and we determine what is right and what is wrong. And so when you get into that, you begin to, and listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. Chaos will be experienced unless there's a move of God. Because a society cannot be sustained on just a subjective rule book, okay? Because it's ever changing and it's ever evolving, all right? And so for years and years and years, there has been, we're not a Christian nation, okay? Never really have been, but it was founded on Christian principles. So you had everybody look to God for the law. When you hear in the Constitution that men are endowed certain rights by their Creator, what they were saying was, we are not the end all, okay? We know that there is something above us, and some of them didn't know exactly what it was, and we're not going to get into that, but they recognized that humans weren't top, okay? That's not the way it is anymore. Now it's, we are our own gods. Now, nobody would say that because they reject God, but what they're saying is that we can figure this out, and I don't need a God to tell me how to behave. But here's the crazy thing. The more that we reject God, the more that we indeed need him and show our need for him. So this is what Paul is talking about. When we begin to walk away and step away from God and his commandments and his law, then we begin to darken our minds and reject his truth. And if you don't believe me, then I mean, you know, you can, this isn't political, okay? And I don't care if it is, but here's the deal. I was listening to the radio the other day, and the guy was talking about, you know, he was trying to be sort of in the middle on the bathroom thing, and so he got in touch with this lady who represents a county here in Georgia, and she was basically saying this. She said that just like in the 60s, when African Americans were made to drink at this fountain and use this bathroom, and whites had this fountain and this bathroom, that now we are bringing this together with transgender. Well, here's the problem with that. First, that's a hijack of some really terrible stuff that happened to African Americans, okay? You know, I don't know, the bombings, the dog attacks, the all kinds of stuff, okay? And so common sense, if we had common sense, we would be able to say, look, there's something, look, your race is sacred, okay? You cannot change your race. You can't. God made us diverse, and we are to celebrate that because that is a reflection of him, okay? Here's the deal. You change your sexuality. You can do that. Now, physically, you can, but here's the deal. A guy's a guy. I don't care what you cut off or put on, okay? And same thing with a female. that would be common sense. And it used to be common sense, but it's not anymore because our minds are darkened. So, here's the cool thing about this situation. You're like, what the heck is cool about how crazy everything's going? God's word is being proven now before our very eyes. So that should encourage us as believers to live out our faith even more, because here's the thing that's going to happen is that this lifestyle, well, I'm not going to jump ahead. All right, so anyway, so we darken our minds with truth. That's the pattern of the world, okay? Here's the thing, which is because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. Here's the deal. The Jews had the law, okay? But God revealed to everyone who wasn't a Jew himself through the conscience, okay? So, like, we just know that rape and murder are bad, okay? Like, across culture, doesn't matter. That's bad. Nobody's going to be like, yeah, hey, let's do that, unless you're like a Viking or something, okay? I don't know. But that's bad. We know inherently that that's bad, all right? How do we know that? Have you ever thought about that? How do we know that? There are people who say, well, social contract. Yeah, but I've never been like outside of like North America. So how do people over there know that that's bad as well? Because God has written his law on our hearts. Okay? And so here's the funny thing. Now, I don't watch them as much because I get fired up. But I used to watch a lot of debates between, like John Lennox is one of my favorite guys, but and other atheists, okay? Here's the thing about atheists. They are mad, like fired up, crazy, red-faced, spitting mad about something they don't believe in. Does that make any sense? Like my daughter had an imaginary friend. His name was Pondry when she was little, okay? Pondry. I don't know. I guess she was pondering and there was Pondry. I don't understand how that came about, but that's what she named him, okay? That would be like me saying, I can't stand Pondry. I'm just so frustrated. Pondry is ruining the world. Pondry is causing wars. Pondry is making people feel guilty. Pondry is doing all this stuff. And you would be like, you've lost it. You're nuts, right? Here's the deal. No matter what, people know there is inherently a God, whether they reject him or not. And the more angry they get, to me, that's more evidence that they know that God is indeed written his law in their heart. We don't get mad. Nobody's mad at Zeus, right? In here? Nobody's mad at Zeus, okay? Why? Because Zeus was a made-up God, right? So there is proof. Guys, what I want us to do is look around. Here's the deal. Side sermon here, okay? I know we all get mad because we feel like, things are going crazy. Scripture tells us things are going to go crazy, okay? And they're only going to get crazier before Jesus comes back, all right? Here's the deal. Is that you have an opportunity to be salt and light. You remember when we talked about that a couple of months ago? Instead of getting so flippin' angry about how crazy stuff is, go out there and change it. Go out there and be light. Be sense. Proclaim God's truth. Not in a way that like, it doesn't have to be political. Okay? And I know we're the mock republic type, whatever mishmash thing that we are. But here's the deal. And I was talking actually to Kevin earlier this morning about it. Did Jesus come in and try and change the Roman government? He didn't, did he? He didn't. The only thing he said was pay taxes, right? So what he did was affirm that government. We talked about that, how God puts governments in place. Listen, the way that you change this culture that we lament so often is that we take the words of Jesus Christ seriously and we go outside of this church and outside of ourselves and we love those people who look different than us, who think different than us, and who act different than us. That's how it works. That's God's plan for evangelism. Not get the right politicians in so we get the legislation passed to protect us. It doesn't work. Look, God supersedes all that stuff. Okay? Look, the next president is not your Messiah. Your Messiah has already come, and he's told us what we are to do. Okay, now we're going to go back to transformation, okay? All right. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what is being made, so that they would be without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay, so what Paul is saying is, like a kid, like, can look around and be like, no, there's something beyond me here. There's something. We can look at creation and how everything is just fine-tuned and how everything works in unison except us. Right? Like there aren't like dolphins who are polluting, right? Because they're making like boats and they're polluting the air. No, there's not. We are the only things on earth that destroy the earth. It's us. Think about how messed up that is. But yet there's a group of people who worship the creation and give absolutely no credit to the Creator whatsoever. We call them naturalists. That the universe is just that. It's all there is. And then when we die, we just die. There's no hope. There's no nothing. There's no God. But we can look around and see that things don't just happen. Like order does not come out of chaos. If I took dynamite and blew my truck up, it's not going to be a nicer, newer truck, right? With all the bells and whistles, more involved and more complicated than the one before it. It's just going to be some scrap, right? We know that. We understand that. So we know that. Here's a funny explanation that I heard the other day. A guy named Francis Schaeffer. He said this. He said that because something is physical, nothing has to be physical. Y'all think about that for a second. Nothing is just that. It's nothing, right? But that's a huge problem. Here's how the Big Bang happened. And the Big Bang did happen. When God said, let there be. And there was. So nothing and then something. That's the power of God. But men will not admit that because we want to be our gods. We want to answer all the questions, and we don't have answers to those questions, but we'll make some up even if they defy common sense, even if they're self-contradictory. You know, multiverse is another way that scientists try to get God out of the equation. They say, well, we're just one universe in billions of universes. Here's the other thing. We don't know that. That's not testable, right? You don't know that. Or there has to be life on other planets. Here's the thing, too, and Christians kind of make me laugh at this, is look, there could be life on other planets, guys. There could be. God never said there weren't. All right, he's concerned his scripture with life on this planet, okay? But here's the other thing that scientists try to do, which is funny because, you know, Christians are like angels and demons. Those things aren't real. But there are some high scientists that actually believe that aliens came and visited the earth and gave us information on how to build and how to organize civilizations and all that. Yeah. Some of you are like, really? Yeah, they are. There are real scientists and top-tier jobs that believe that. Why? Because when you try and take God out of something, you're grasping at straws. Because he is the explanation for everything. He is the uncaused cause, the all-powerful, timeless God creator of us. And unless we recognize that, then our minds are darkened. And we become futile in our thinking. And we see that. Look, here's the deal. Yes, we're more advanced because we have more gadgets than other, but in a lot of ways, we've devolved. We've. Oh, that's the next one. I'm trying to keep straight. All right, here we go. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. So they became idol worshipers. So here's the deal. Anything you take out of the spot where God should be, which is directly in the center of the throne of your heart, and whatever you put there, you have now become an idol worshiper. Okay? And so some people worship this planet. Some people like to hug trees and, don't step on like beetles and other things because, all life is sacred and, all this good stuff, which life is sacred. But I don't know about a beetle, but, life is sacred. Definitely not a roach. So, that could be relative too. But anyway, and there's others that truly believe like the universe should be worshipped. Like we should just be in awe of the universe, which is true if you're in awe of God who created the universe. But if you're just in awe of the universe, you're just in awe of like stars, which is really cool if you look at the Hubble telescope pictures and all this stuff. But that is supposed to point us to God so that we would just glorify him even more, that we would just bow down and worship him because of his creative awesomeness, that at his words he can just speak and things just happen and just come into existence, and stars and all the beautiful quasars and all this stuff that God did that. And he did it so that we would recognize him. But we in our thinking don't do that. Here's the deal. Like, fine-tuning is a pretty solid argument for the universe of how fine-tuned everything is. And so here's what atheists and naturalists now say, because, it's kind of hard to refute that DNA is a code, and we only know codes come from minds. It's where we've only ever experienced it. And so now they say, well, God, if he was designer, then his design's imperfect. And they're like, why? Well, the world's full of 85% of water, and only like 2% of it can be drinkable. I'm like, dude, you got water, right? You can drink it. But those oceans, we all learned this in third grade? The oceans, the clouds go up, and then they come filled full, and then it rains, and then everything goes back to the ocean, and it's a cycle that continues and goes and goes and goes. It's perfect. It's perfect. Okay? And what I want us to see today, primarily, is that God is awesome. Some of us don't take the time to look at creation and just worship him. Look, Google space pictures, okay? That is some of the coolest stuff you have ever seen in your life. The colors and the way that stars, man, it is just awesome. And you know why God did that? Because he's awesome. And so when we see things like that, we should worship. We should worship. We're about to have our fourth kid. And it never, this whole process of pregnancy is just, it's an amazing, amazing thing. Like there's a little human, okay, in my wife's, we tell our kids tummy, but it's her uterus, okay, is swimming around in amniotic fluid, and it was, a pin-sized pinhead, and now it's 13, 14 weeks, and it's got arms and, mouth, and it's just like, that is awesome. Even more awesome that this one's a boy. But it's awesome. God chose to do it that way for a reason. Look, everything that God has done reflects his glory and should draw worship from us. Everything. But we try and take credit for stuff. Okay? Listen, who's ever created anything in here? Nobody, right? Who's ever spoken into existence like Little Debbie's or something? You're hungry, It's like Swiss cake rolls. No, you can't. You can't do that. There has to be an explanation of why we're here, and there's only one. It's because God spoke it into existence. And we have that truth, and we need to live like it. Here's the deal. I believe with all my heart that if we were more worshipful of God like we're called to be, I'm not just talking about the 15 minutes on Sunday when we sing songs about God, but if we just looked and said, God, you're amazing. and we were just in awe of him, if we slowed down, then people would see that. And they'd be like, you know what, there's something to that Christianity stuff. Because listen, if you do take the time, I promise you, God will put you on your face. And that is an awesome place to be. Because we realize how incredibly small we are and how enormously, infinitely large he is. And then those little worries that you have that we sing about giving over to Jesus, you would actually give those worries over to Jesus. Because you would realize, you know what? He's got this. And then your life begins to transform. When we stop saying it and we begin to live it. When we stop singing about it and we actually begin to practice worship of God. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for the image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and of crawling creatures. Therefore God gave them over to the lust in their hearts, to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. So that's what Paul's talking about, is idol worship. Idol worship. What idols do you have in your life? And remember, an idol is anything that you put in front of God. Anything. Could be your kids. Could be your job. Could be your spouse. Could be your house. Could be a mouse. Just went Dr. Seuss there, okay? Look, it could be anything, okay? Whatever you have put in that point. Sorry, I couldn't help it. All right, here we go. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions for their women and exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And in the same way, also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire towards one another. Men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. So here's the deal. Third, sex. Look, God created sex, okay? And that too points to him, and we glorify him through that and in our appreciation of it. So sex is good, okay? I know there's some younger guys in here. Sex is good. God created it in the confines of marriage, okay? Awesome, all right? Here's the deal. We are so sex crazed with absolutely everything that we've made that a god. And here's why things keep getting worse and worse in relation to sex. It's because it never ends. You can try this, which was now taboo, but guess what? Now the excitement of that is gone. So we just need to be more free in our sexual expression. And then when that doesn't work, we need to be even more free in our sexual expression. Till the end, we're never satisfied. Never satisfied. Listen, let me explain this today. Guys and women. Sex is not an end to itself. Okay? Sex points to God in the confinement of marriage. Okay? But we use sex to sell everything, right? We use sex to, look, funny thing, the commercial, I'm just going to be a little honest right now. Commercial about diarrhea, right? Okay? So this guy's on the beach. He's like, yeah, I used to suffer from constant pain and diarrhea until I took whatever tour it is, whatever, okay? And so he's in his bathing suit, six-pack abs, nice chest. I don't hate him. I don't like him, but I don't hate him, right? And so then this chick comes up in her bathing suit and they put their arms around each other and they run off, right? That's life, right? I'm often found myself at the beach with my wife talking about diarrhea because that's where it happens, okay? No, if you want to be real about that, have a dude in rush hour traffic white-knuckling the steering wheel, okay? If you want to be real, do that. But that's not what they do, right? Because here's the deal, especially in men, like when you see an image, a sexual image, it's like laser printed into your head, and they know that, okay? So the weird thing is, next time you have diarrhea, you're going to be thinking about this dude and this chick that was running on the beach, and you're like, I'm going to have to give me some of that, right? But it doesn't work that way. It does work, obviously, because they do it. But that is only taking and degrading what God meant for marriage. And as a culture becomes more sexually promiscuous, it downward spirals deeper and deeper towards chaos. Sex is a big deal. Sex is what's driving most of what people are doing these days. And that should scare us. Here's why. Because truth has been erased. Okay? Truth is now relative. And so once you take God out of the picture, once you take morality out of the picture, then sex is open. And you can do whatever you want. And here's the scary thing about that. Is that leads to all kinds of stuff. I would again encourage you to study Roman society, especially towards the end of what happened. And we're headed that way unless God intervenes or unless the church takes seriously the call to be salt and light. Here's the deal. I said it earlier and I want to reiterate this. That God's fix to this problem isn't government. Okay? His fix has been here in this country for well over 200 years. It's the church. And until we stop conforming to this society and to begin to be transformed ourselves, then we will see this society transformed. But it won't be through selfish motives because our way of life is no longer comfortable. It will be because we see people who are lost in need of Jesus Christ and we love them. We love them. You see what I'm saying? Look, we've been conformed without even knowing we've been conformed. We've been silent. You know, we've talked about this before, but the church was largely silent during the civil rights movement. What a cowardly thing. Look, we've been silent as the world's just sort of, you know, with Darwinism, even in the late 1800s, the church just kind of shuddered. Listen, we have the answers, guys. But those answers have to be given in love. And not in anger and not in hatred, because that's just a sounding gong, okay? God has called us to be salt and light. So it's time. Listen, if you want to change this culture for your kids, A, you better start being discipled yourself, but B, you better disciple them. If you want to change the culture, you better take seriously the call to follow Jesus Christ. And prayer and scripture better be important to you in your house. Listen, I say it all the time. Andy does a great job with the kids. Chastity does a great job with the kids. You, fathers, are the primary disciplers of your children. And so what's important to you is ultimately going to be what's important to them. And if it's not Jesus, guess what? They're not just going to be like, oh, Jesus is important. I know my dad didn't model that or say anything about it. Look, it's up to you. Okay? So their minds were darkened. They gave them over to their passions. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind, to those things which are not proper, being filled with things which, with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they do not do the same thing. They do not only do the same thing, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Look, we're seeing that now, okay? I read an article the other day, and this is legit, that basically a law professor at Harvard said that if a Christian or a conservative or a religious conservative doesn't get in line with the liberal philosophy, then they should be treated like the Nazis were after World War II or Japan was after we nuked them and then came in and rebuilt. So here's the dangerous thing, is that that's happening not in Southwest Dakota State Community College. This is at Harvard, okay? And I don't know if you guys realize this, but Harvard produces a lot of people who are in politics, a lot of people who are in law, and not only Harvard, but Princeton and a lot of the other Ivy League colleges. So this is the thought that men have literally given over to depraved minds, and they do approve of anyone who approves of what they do and do the very things that they advocate, but also they are very hostile towards those who don't see things the way that they see. And here's the thing, and I say that to say this, that we're living this out. And Paul experienced this, okay? This is what happens when a culture turns from God completely. And you're like, well, I thought you said we weren't a Christian nation. We were never a Christian nation, okay? But people would identify with God, with the Judeo-Christian God. We're not there anymore. We're not there. So I hope you feel the weight of that. Because as I said earlier, it's our job to go into the trenches where we are hated, where things will happen to us that are bad, that we may not like, but that we're called to go because of Jesus' example. He went. Okay, so like right now, nobody's going to be getting hung on a cross or flogged or beaten. So we should take an opportunity now. As Paul says in Ephesians 5, I believe it's 15, that we should walk and not waste time because the days are evil, which we're going to talk about next week. What we think about when we think about our time. So, let me ask you this. Because we're seeing this. We're seeing churches, large denominations, conform with the world. And anytime we see that, we need to run the other way. Listen, here's the thing. Being a Christian isn't a popularity contest, okay? Ask Jesus. All right, he was real cool for a minute, and then they beat him and hung him up on the cross, and everybody that was cheering for him earlier is now cheering for his death, right? So it's not a popularity contest, okay? That you can be bold and courageous and still be loving. That's what we're called to be. Listen, there was no one more courageous than Jesus Christ. I mean, dude would walk up where he knew people had rocks behind their backs ready to throw at him, and he would do what he said, and then he would just turn and walk away. I mean, Jesus was awesome. I want you guys to read Scripture, read the Gospels, and know that is God in man right there. And I want Jesus for us to move from an ideology, just some ideal that we have, but to a personal relationship with him. That's what we're lacking, guys. If we're getting down to why the crux of we're doing this transformation series, it's because we're not being transformed because we like the idea of Jesus, but we don't really know Jesus. And here's the awesome thing about God who created us in the universe, is he made us so that we may know him. No other creatures were made in his image. Just us. Think about that. Let that soak in. That God created us for relationship with him. So I want to ask you this in closing. I want you to take an honest assessment of your life, and we're going to be... Here's the thing. Pain is the only way we change, typically, right? So we have to take painful self-examination and say, am I conforming to this world? Do I have something that I've made an idol in my life? Or is there part of God's truth that my mind has just been darkened to because I refuse to hear it? Or have I made sex what life is about? And if you say yes to any of those things, then repent. Repent. Hit your knees and ask God, who is gracious and loving, and he will forgive you. But here is the thing. He'll tell you this, to go and sin no more. That means you have to let that go. Let it go. And sometimes those roots run deep, don't they? Those roots run deep. So listen, if you're conforming, you don't have to. Or if you're scared. I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes I get scared because, this world is nuts. And I'm about to have my 4th kid, and I'm pushing 40. And I'm like, God, why? Why? I don't want another child in this crazy world. He did. So I need to shut up, fall in line, right? That was a little too emphatic. That was not an amen part, Foster. Because ultimately it's what he wants, not what I want. So what's my job is to disciple and love not only that young man, but all my kids and point them to Jesus Christ. It's the same thing for the culture, guys. That we are to love this culture. And what I've been hearing in the news and seeing in the papers, it's not Christian love towards the culture. It's more like a Christian temper tantrum because we're losing. But here's the thing. With Christ, you never lose. You never lose if you're holding on to him. But I guarantee you this, whatever you're holding on to in his place, you will lose. And it will be painful.